Jessica Lange visits home in far north.
Review Bill Murray as a ruthless TV executive with a bit of a ghost problem in Scrooged. Terry Garr has her eye on Gene Hackman in the romantic comedy Full Moon and Blue Water. And Steve Guttenberg is reunited with alien Tawny Welch in Cocoon, The Return. It's all coming up next on Siskel and Ebert.
Where do you think you're going?
None of your business.
It is where you're supposed to be in your rug hooking class.
Take your hands off him.
For what?
Or you'll be sorry.
I said let him go. Out of my way, you old coot.
Easy, Rambo.
They were offered the chance to live forever on another planet, but these old people have returned to Earth for another visit and another decision in Cocoon, The Return. It's one of 5 new movies we'll be reviewing this week on Siskel and Ebert. I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune. Our first film is the eagerly awaited Cocoon, The Return, and all the original players are back except Ron Howard, the director. He's been replaced, and the result is a very choppy film with bite-sized bits of emotion cascading on top of each other. In the original film, you'll recall a bunch of residents from a retirement home discover a fountain of youth in a pool containing the pods of alien creatures. They wind up being offered a trip to a planet where no one gets sick or ages. Most of them elect to go. In the sequel, the aliens in human form bring back the old gang for a visit home to help them rescue other aliens threatened by undersea earthquakes.
The cocoons are in danger, Jack. The sensors that we left on the bottom of the ocean floor indicate seismic activity. We've come to take our friends away. We've got 4 days to rescue them before our ship returns to take us home.
That's Tawny Welch is the beautiful alien. One of the cocoons ends up being captured by the scientists, and the question is whether it will survive earthly experimentation.
Oh, my God.
What is it? It's a life form.
Much of the film has to do with the reactions of the returning old folks to being back home. Most of them realize they miss it, even the aches and pains.
Hey, what's going on?
Well, it's been such a long time since you needed me for anything like this. I guess I kind of missed it.
The Ulsters have one other mission, and that's to help their friend Bernie, played by Jack Gilford, get over grieving his late wife. He refused to leave Earth in the first film.
Joe, maybe we should go and keep him company.
I see something that'll get his juices flowing.
And so they fix him up with a widow played by Elaine Stritch, who is tough as nails and runs the local motel. Their relationship, I think, is the best thing in the new movie, but it's smothered by a script that tries too hard to cover every base. Scenes are cut off just when they're getting interesting, so that the movie can move on to a different issue. Cocoon, The Return wears you out with its goodwill and special effects. It's not a bad film, but less of it, fewer subjects, would have made this film so much better.
Well, I'm not going to recommend the movie either, but I liked a lot of it. I liked in particular, and who could dislike, the performances of that wonderful cast, those older actors who are so filled with energy, so filled with warmth, and it's good to see them again. But the question I had is, why did they come back to Earth again? And the real answer is, so they could make this sequel.
Right.
There was no compelling, they've made their decisions, they've left. Now they come back so they can make their decisions and leave again. They said goodbye in the first film, now they come back so they can say goodbye in the second film. Cocoon, The Return is basically the same film all over again without the surprises of the first one involving who these aliens are in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, you know what I'm talking about when I'm saying too many subjects?
Yeah,
I mean, they have a dinner sequence that looks like it was taken from Splash, you know, with this time making love, disturbing the restaurant rather than eating the lobster. They throw in a basketball game that you know, it goes on and on and on.
You can have the basketball game. That's the equivalent of the swimming.
Well, what I'm saying is that
there are too many different relationships that have to be updated, plus the subplot involving the kidnapped alien or the research scientist and so forth.
That's one extra one. I mean, it's like a laundry list. The director, Daniel Petrie, I don't think had a sense of cutting this film down to the essential relationships and let that run.
And even apart from that, like almost all sequels, it had no compelling reason really to be made in the first place. Okay, next movie. Our next movie is named Full Moon and Blue Water, and this is one of those unclassifiable movies that isn't really very good, but exerts a strange sort of fascination all the same. It takes place on a shabby island off the Texas coast where Gene Hackman runs a saloon and a restaurant, or at least he did until a year ago when his wife disappeared. And ever since then, Hackman has been kind of a hermit. He's let the place run down while he spends his time mourning his missing wife and looking at old home movies of her. He calls this behavior his devotions. But that doesn't convince Terry Garr, a local woman who thinks he ought to really face reality and start a new life with her.
You know, I've been living at home all my life. Been driving that damn school bus going on 9 years now. But I have managed to save up $6,300. And I'm willing to put every penny of it into this here operation, okay?
I can't take that, Louise. You know my devotions.
The island is filled with a gallery of weird characters, including Hackman's father-in-law, played by Burgess Meredith, and a retarded local man named Jimmy who works for Hackman. Now, this is Jimmy's idea of how to entertain the father-in-law. After Jimmy apparently kills the old man by pushing him off the pier, he's convinced the law is going to get him, so he grabs a gun and tries a desperate plan to take hostages.
I'm taking her hostage, so you won't try anything funny when I leave.
Well, take Virgil hostage.
Sure. Nobody asked me.
If you can believe that, you can believe anything in this movie, and believe me, there's a lot to believe. Some of the relationships in the movie are quirky and interesting. For example, when Gene Hackman tries to explain to Terry Garr why it's all right for them to have an affair, even though he's still in mourning for his wife with these bizarre devotions that he carries out. Also like when Terry Garr tells Gene Hackman she's not to be trifled with. That's a good scene. I like the energy between them. But where do they get the rest of this cockeyed scenario with wheelchairs flying off the end of the pier and crooked real estate men trying to swindle everybody coming over from the mainland? Full Moon in Blue Water has some interesting characters, but eventually the movie simply grows too bewildering to possibly take seriously.
You said, I think it's pretty bad, worse than you. When you said some interesting characters, actually I found their grab bag of characters to be kind of boring, because when you try and write a character, which is what this feels like when you watch it, you know, here's going to be trot somebody out who has some other little affliction or some little quirk of personality. It's so obvious. I think that characters, when you come upon them and they genuinely surprise you, that's another thing. Here it's just like a little parade of ducks, only it's a parade of characters, and I wasn't interested in watching any of them.
I know what you're talking about. Often you see that in the movies. It's kind of a movie version of Southern Gothic, kind of William Faulkner rewritten by Mad Magazine, where, you know, let's have the father-in-law have Alzheimer's disease and be in a wheelchair, and let's have Jimmy come in and run the wheelchair off the pier. And this is supposed to indicate local color. All it really indicates is a fevered imagination on the part of the screenwriter who doesn't want to deal with the real elements of the story.
I mean, Terry Garr and Gene Hackman, in real life, or in a real life situation, these are good actors, would deal with this situation between them in a much more interesting way than is presented here on the screen, and they wouldn't have all these other people coming in and interrupting them.
Probably
these
so.
Fake people, fake people.
Coming up next, Bill Murray stars in Scrooged, playing a mean TV executive in a modern retelling of A Christmas Carol.
Why did you do that?
Sometimes you have to slap.
The selfish TV executive on Christmas Eve is visited by 3 ghosts. Yes, this is an update of A Christmas Carol, and first, according to form, we have to see how selfish this Scrooge is. How selfish is he? He doesn't care what has to be done to get his holiday special on the air. That's one thing for sure.
I can't get the antlers glued onto this little guy. We tried crazy glue, but it don't work.
Have you tried staples?
Staples?
That's the funniest bit in the whole movie, stapling antlers on a mouse. As a result of actions like that, Bill Murray gets a familiar warning in a new, high-tech manner.
You are going to be visited by 3 ghosts.
Ooh, 3 ghosts.
3 ghosts, Frank. Expect the first one tomorrow at noon.
God, tomorrow's bad for me, Lou. As a matter of fact, the whole rest of the week is a washout. Ouch. Well, maybe we could have drinks, say Thursday. You, me, the ghost, Trader Vic's around 4.
No joke, Frank. This is your last chance.
All right. I could squeeze you in for a breakfast. Oh, no, please, don't think I'm a suicide.
The ghost of Christmas Present is played by Carol Kane. She's not as gentle as she appears.
Close your eyes. And think.
No. You close your eyes.
Oh, no.
I'm through.
Don't be bothersome. Close your eyes. And think of snowflakes and moonbeams and whiskers on kids. No picking.
This is a most inventive and very funny film, I'd say about half the time, when it's setting up the introduction to the Bill Murray character. Then with the ghost, it starts to wander into areas of weak imitation of the Ghostbusters, and yet Bill Murray is absolutely hilarious throughout. It's a close call, but I'm giving this movie thumbs up for its big laughs early on and a sweet relationship between Bill Murray and Karen Allen toward the end of the picture.
Now, I didn't like it at all, and I'll tell you why. I felt that I was picking up throughout the movie more of an aura of anger and hostility than I was one of comedy. For example, at the end when Bill Murray gives his long speech about brotherhood and loving each other and the Christmas spirit and the whole cast is behind him, that seemed almost like a frenzied harangue. It seemed like he was protesting too much, that he was pushing it. It didn't have any gentleness or any real warmth in it. It seemed like a guy having a nervous breakdown instead of having a Christmas message for us. And throughout the movie, I felt an undercurrent of a lot of anger and high tension throughout this film, rather than the humor you'd be looking for.
Well, I only found it in the area where I was talking about the ghosts when they go for special effects, and indeed it is a high-tech kind of movie. I mean, now, obviously, there's somebody had their eye on Ghostbusters. It was made by Richard Donner, who made Superman, so they have a special effects mentality, and they think that's going to be commercial for kids. That's the weakness of the film. But I mean, you had to be amused at the character that Bill Murray plays at the top of the film. I mean, that's a very funny character.
I think you could probably even improve on some of the jokes about television. But I want to ask you something.
Go ahead.
A long time ago, you had this interview with George Scott that you often quote, where he told you about the 3 things you should look for in movie acting.
Yeah.
The third one was joy of performance.
Yes.
Did you get any joy of performance out of Bill Murray?
Yes,
I don't think he enjoyed making this picture.
Well, I have no idea, and I don't know whether any actor likes doing the work that they do, and I don't know that I care. I mean, it wouldn't seem like it would be fun.
Well, it's your test. You ought to care.
No, it wouldn't seem like it was fun for Robert De Niro to play the character in Raging Bull. But I do believe that Bill Murray is having a good time there. He's ad-libbing like he usually does, and it seems very funny.
Well, I don't think the ad-libs work either, but we're not talking about fun. We're talking about joy of performance.
I understand. I think he had a good time.
Okay, when we come back, the story of one of the last and bravest victims of the Nazis in Hanna's War. And later in the show, Phil Collins stars as a British star as the famous model and actress Marushka Detmers, and a surprisingly effective performance as Hanna Sinish, a young woman who joins an underground anti-Nazi group and responds with astonishing courage after she's captured and tortured. The movie shows her escaping from Hitler's Europe to a safe haven in Palestine before choosing to return as a member of the resistance. Soon after re-entering the war zone, she's captured by the Nazis.
Aufwachen oder beschießen!
The movie shows the diabolical methods of physical and psychological torture used in an attempt to discover the names of resistance fighters. In this scene, Ellen Burstyn plays Hanna's mother, who is used by Donald Pleasance, one of the Nazi torturers, to force Hanna to make a horrible choice.
Now, my girl, I think you understand the information that is required of you. Who sent you here? Why were you sent? Names and whereabouts of your collaborators. And last but not least, the code. That's all. It's very simple. Either you talk, or you condemn your mother to death.
Now here is one of the most effective scenes in the movie. Hanna knows it will do no good to speak in her own defense, but she does so anyway, defying the Nazi court.
Have a good look at yourself. Can anyone here stand up and say that he is proud of what he's doing? And soon, oh, very soon, you and you and you are going to be standing where I'm standing now.
The crucial element in the case of Hanna Sinish was that she resisted her torturers so well that she kept her secrets right up to the end of the war. She was condemned to death almost at the moment when Europe was being liberated by the Allies, and if she had wanted to, she could have saved her life, but it would have meant betraying her principles, and so she chose to die. I was very impressed by the performance of Marushka Detmers in the title role. She's a 24-year-old actress who has appeared in mostly erotic roles in movies by Godard and Bellocchio. This time she has a difficult acting assignment, and she responds with a great performance.
Well, it's a great story, but I tell you, I think the way that the story is told, it becomes a little bit cornball in aspects. I'm not saying that I wasn't moved in scenes where she's being tortured because it represents so many other people who were tortured. But in the way that it's been directed, is it Menachem Golan, I think?
Menachem Golan.
Yeah, I mean, it's amateurish directing. I felt bad because here's a great subject being treated almost like a comic book style. A little setup, little head turns, close-ups. I think you know what I'm talking about in the direction. And I felt that every time that, you can tell a story beautifully with long shots, but if you cut it up and look here, look there, and then constant music under the soundtrack when it's obviously dramatic and you don't need a musical theme, I just felt that the director really here ruined what was otherwise a good story.
Well, Menachem Golan is not a subtle director, but I think he's a very professional director who is able to tell this story effectively. However, I will grant you the soundtrack music. The music in this movie is what Hollywood calls Mickey Mouse music. Mickey goes up the stairs, the music goes da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Mickey goes down the stairs, the music goes da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And somebody should have taken the entire musical track out of this movie, either left it out or replaced it with something that's that gives us credit for having enough intelligence to know how to feel.
All right.
So that I'll grant you, but I still recommend the movie.
I recommend reading about Hanna Senish, but I don't recommend the film because I think the director butchered the story. Coming up next, the inside story of one of the small-time crooks who helped pull off the infamous British Great Train Robbery of 1963. His name and the name of the film is Buster.
Buster.
Small-time British crook, nicely played by singer Phil Collins, making his feature film debut. Buster is a petty thief who steals as a habit only what he needs. If his wife complains that their baby needs some clothes and ointments, Buster steals exactly the clothes and ointments she needs. Nothing more, nothing less. He just goes shopping without paying in the middle of the night. But then Buster and his fellow thieves hit the big time, and they join forces to pull off the Great Train Robbery of 1963, the largest theft of its kind at that time. So Buster turns out to be the true story of Buster Edwards, one of the real 15 great train robbers. And here is Buster before the robbery being chewed out by his wife, Julie Walters, from educating Rita. She's tired of his scattershot ways of financing their lives.
Pay the rent? Why can't you pay for a house?
How much does that house cost, June?
3,000 quid.
Right, how much does this place cost to rent?
£3 a week.
Right, now that's why. Now let me watch the Cowboys, for Christ's sake.
You could get a mortgage like other people.
Do what?
Borrow it from a bank.
Well, I do borrow from banks. I mean, that is my job.
I mean, with their permission.
After the big robbery, the movie turns into a love story on the run as Buster plans to leave England for Mexico with his family to follow.
I don't know. I'm frightened. I love you so much.
Look, listen to me, you old bag. We shut up with you for 24 hours a day, 7 days a bleeding week, near enough. Got most men would have throttled their old ladies by now. You want to know why I haven't? Because you are the best bloody thing that's ever happened to me.
Both Phil Collins and Julie Walters are appealing in their roles. The film doesn't quite sustain itself after the excitement of the initial robbery, but once you get accustomed to the fact that this movie is not going to be a traditional hyped-up robbery film about just a robbery, the more personal story has a few good moments, and Buster is a decent entertainment.
I enjoyed it. I thought Phil Collins did a good job here as kind of a lower-key, slightly less violent Bob Hoskins, if you remember him from The Long Good Friday, or Roger Rabbit for that matter. Phil Collins is a surprisingly good actor.
Very
good. He's known basically as a rock singer. I also like the fact that these people really were in love. This man and his wife were in love, and that was more important to them than anything.
Right.
And they get over to Mexico, and she doesn't like it because when she finally has enough money for steak and fries, the Mexicans don't want to give her steak and fries. They want to give her tamales, so she says, I can't take it. She goes back home, and he says, I can't live without my wife. I'd rather be in jail in England eating tamales and freedom. And that kind of story really does have a nice resonance to it.
Now look back at a movie we reviewed earlier on this show called Full Moon and Blue Water, okay? That was a film about quirky characters.
Yes.
Well, she is a quirky character. You don't expect her to react that way. I mean, every
But you
time,
believe it, though.
Because it was written real in a way. I mean, in other words, the movie is about people who are rob trains to get a lot of money. Normally, what they do is they take their fancy and they have their thrill and they're gone. She rejects it. I mean,
she just looks at her plate in a Mexican restaurant and she said, "We never had the money for steak and chips before."
I know. It is based on a true. It is based on a true story, and maybe that's where they came up with the good character.
You know what I thought was fascinating? The information at the end that Buster and his wife are now running a flower stall at Waterloo Station in London. I'm going to go buy a bouquet from them the next time I'm over there. Now let's recap the movies we reviewed, and I'm going to count my change, too. Now let's recap the movies we reviewed on this show. 2 thumbs down for Cocoon, The Return, a sometimes charming but overstuffed and unnecessary remake. 2 more thumbs down for Full Moon and Blue Water, a needlessly bizarre cast of characters in search of a believable story. A split decision on Scrooged with Bill Murray. Gene liked the Murray character and the television satire. I felt the comedy covered up a lot of anger. I voted thumbs up for Hanna's War and the Marushka Detmers performance. Gene thought the movie was destroyed by bad direction and music. 2 thumbs up for Buster with his charming performances by Phil Collins and Julie Walters. And so, actually, it's the British sleeper of the week, the one nobody's heard about, called Buster, that we both voted yes
Out
for.
of all the big production, big star stuff, that's the one I like. But I also like Bill Murray in Scrooge, but just Bill Murray in Scrooge, and Karen Allen, too. That's it for this week. Next time, we'll be back with reviews of more new films, including The Naked Gun, starring Leslie Nielsen and Priscilla Presley, in the latest comedy from the makers of Airplane. Also, Mississippi Burning, a dramatization of the story of 3 civil rights workers murdered down in the South in the early 60s. That's next week. And until then, the balcony is closed.
Nestle Crunch. It's creamy milk chocolate and crispy crunchies. Chocolate is scrumptious when it crunches. That's why you'll love Nestle Crunch. What's great for kids and parents? A bucket full of Duplo blocks and Lego bricks. Now you can store the toys that build great imaginations. After work or after workout, Daisy Turbo Spa combines powerful water massage and tingling aeration to turn your tub into a personal whirlpool. Sony videotapes. For taping your favorite movies, trust Sony Dynamicron ES. Whatever your videotape needs, there's only one name to play back, Sony.